So, in a blow of free speech, Texas social media law allowed to proceed pending appeal is the name of the article. It's from, like I said, the EFF and written by Karen Gallo. So that is a little. So late last year, NetChoice and the Computer and Communications Industry Association put in a lawsuit stating that Texas House Bill 20 was unconstitutional. A judge agreed with them, so they put a hold on the bill's enactment into law, while they were trying to get this figured out. Well, right now, appeals, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals has overturned the Fifth Circuit Court's ruling, and just said in a 2-1 decision, lifted that injunction. And so, if you don't know, Texas House Bill 20 prohibits the large social media platforms from removing or moderating content based on the viewpoint of the user. And this can now be enforced while the courts continue their appeal. This has all kinds of crazy in it. Let me open it up to the floor. What, Kelly, tell me, what do you think about Attorney General Paxton's bid to, I don't know, change how social media works or get around 320?
It seems like every day they're trying to pass laws limiting what people's freedoms can be down in Texas. And I'm always surprised that the more they do it. And this one, it's really weird to me because I own a business. And it's basically saying that my customers can come in and tell me how I run my business. And that just isn't right? I don't quite understand how anybody could think that that would be the right thing to do. It goes against everything that we've ever done in this country, against the rights of the person who owns the business. And I see 2 things that have played here that have been happening, like 2 trends that have been happening, and they're kind of like coming together here. And one is this growing trend of Republican candidates that want to try and get rid of the government and cut it down. And this is exactly what we're doing here, because we're trying to get rid of any oversight that we might have instead of letting instead of letting the government have some oversight into maybe ways some of these laws are passed. They're just going to give that to people. And it doesn't make sense to me in a lot of ways, because throughout history, the majority of people have mostly been wrong. So it's also opening up this whole thing to hate speech and everything else. And I have a real problem with it. Like I said, as a business owner,
It seems like it's like they're trying to dog whistle this whole thing and say that the whole point of this is that that the social media companies are restricting people with a certain viewpoint, with a conservative or right-wing viewpoint, and that they're the ones that are being the victims in all of this. And they're ignoring the fact that a lot of the times when people have been cut off from these social media sites like Twitter, like Donald Trump, for example, was because he was a right-wing conservative president, and that's the only reason why he was taken down. It ignores the fact that his tweets helped to start an insurrection at the Capitol. It's been people that have been getting constant COVID vaccine misinformation and stuff like that. These aren't political issues that are being fought down, but they're trying to argue that it's conservatives being censored for their viewpoints, when none of these things should have been political at all. Vaccine information belongs to medical professionals. It doesn't belong to the right wing or even the left wing, no matter where you fall onto that. It's very much, they like to act like they're all about small government, not forcing them how to do things, except for when it falls on them. When it comes into Medicare, government shouldn't be doing anything for the people. When it comes into social media, where rich people can actually get something going up against them, that's where they need some help. It's very transparent that they're just trying to get their loud, boisterous voices out into the ether to do whatever kind of indoctrination that they want to do for people, instead of actually like caring about what the social media companies are doing. They don't care about how they're run. They care about having control over people that are on a big platform.
So we've got 3 U.S. citizens here and 1 from our neighbor up north. How does this look from outside?
Yeah, so I'm from Canada, and things are very different here. We have limitations prescribed on our constitutionally defined rights and freedoms. We have it in our first section of our charter. It states that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So basically, we establish that there may be limitations to our rights and freedoms because there needs to be this balancing between the rights of the individual and the interests of the society at large.
Mm-hmm.
So the rights that we've been granted are not necessarily absolute. I want to come back actually to a point. Well, I guess both something that Kelly said and Josh said. So the first thing with regards to Kelly is this idea of property. These sites, they own the domain name. They own the technology underpinning their platform. So I'm a little bit confused because they have this ownership. If you're to walk into a brick and mortar store and you're to do something that the owner finds objectionable for any reason, they can call security or call the police and ask to have somebody unruly removed from their store, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have this sort of carte blanche access to these spaces. And I wonder why we feel that there's this, that we're entitled to this access in a digital space that we're not entitled to in a physical space.
In physical places, we don't even get rules of service that we need to sign before we go into the places. Like on Twitter, nobody reads it, but you have to acknowledge the terms and conditions of it before you sign up for the service. I don't do that when I walk into Walmart. I just walk into Walmart and do my thing.
So Twitter,
it's even more on the ball with this that it's wrong.
Twitter doesn't fall under HB 20 because they have less than 50 million users. So this is hitting YouTube. This is hitting Facebook. And I had heard it explained in this way. So there's 2 things. There's the Section 230, excuse me, I misspoke earlier, of the Communications Decency Act, what states that that's what gives these companies protection against other people using their platform in a way that is counter to law. Say you're not responsible for someone using your platform to do something illegal. So what was kind of explained to me was that only quote unquote interactive computer services can rely on Section 230, and then Section 230 because that protects these sites from being considered publishers of speech, and that's of third-party content. So First Amendment kicks in if companies are expressing their own free speech, but if you are covered under your own free speech, you're not covered under 230 because then you are no longer an interactive computer service. It's very confusing. So you either have to choose one or the other. You either have protection or you have free speech, is kind of how it was explained to me, which still I don't believe is lawful, nor is constitutional. But that's where we sit right now. So I Unfortunately, this last week has been wrought with a couple of mass shootings. One of them was live streamed on Twitch. So this bill would prevent Facebook from being able to block people from sharing that video. How is that good for any part of this society?
It's not, especially when half the time these people are looking for fame, even if they're willing to die for whatever kind of gross mindset that they have. They're looking to be immortalized in some way, and allowing them to have access on a stream like that's horrible. Also, Q formed under these kinds of unrestricted conditions through like a 4chan and 2chan and 8chan and all that kind of stuff. That was completely unmonitored. You couldn't censor it. And then that's how you got that massive conspiracy theory going out there. So having no overlook on this kind of thing, not allowing sites to restrict people when they need to be restricted, is dangerous. It leads to bad ideas just getting out into the world with no checks and balances.
I think maybe I want to push back on that just a little bit. I think the issue here is that the law is trying to restrict sites in their ability to moderate the content. It's not making.
Well, the fact that they couldn't moderate the content is how Q ended up getting as big. It was a free for all kind of thing.
Right. Well, I just want to mention that I don't think that there's necessarily an issue with having an unmoderated space. I certainly don't think that we should be legislating that away, right? Like, I don't want to shut down 4chan necessarily just because it's unmoderated. I think that may be healthy to allow people to have those spaces, but just that if a site chooses to moderate its content, it should be free to do so. So I think I just want to be careful with the two distinctions there. Not necessarily that no site should be unmoderated, just that you have the choice whether you wish to moderate your users' content or not.
I think when it gets dangerous with like conspiracy theories and like anti-vax nonsense, I do think it's in companies' best interest to kind of push back and put some kind of moderation in there. I don't think the law can force them to do it. In most places, I might push back on that a little bit, but I do think that we can't. We've seen the worst. We see white supremacy and sexism and misogyny and racism, all that kind of stuff is what comes about with unmoderated access to sites. And I do think that there needs to be some kind of checks and balances, but this isn't what it's about. This is definitely about sites not being given the right to moderate. And I understand that, but I definitely want to encourage moderation is what I'm more leaning towards.
Oh, certainly. I think you're absolutely right. It is in their best interest, but I just want to ensure that they have the ability to create a site that is unmoderated if they so choose.
Okay. All right, Kelly, any last words before we move on?
Josh mentioned that the false sense of persecution, and I want to make sure that everybody heard that, because that's what's really driving a lot of this, is that these people really think that their voices are being censored and that they're being persecuted. And we all know that comes from a Christian ideal, and it's really toxic. So it's amazing to me that these people want to actually persecute people and use the excuse that they're the ones who are being persecuted while they're doing it. You know, to me, it demonstrates the paranoia they have as a dying philosophical, racial, and religious group. You know, they see that they're losing this position of entitlement. They've been on the top of the social pyramid for the first 2 centuries of this country, and they're thrashing out now like a wounded animal. And to me, they're more dangerous today than they've ever been in my lifetime, even though there's fewer of them. But we have to recognize they're dying off, but we can't be negligent and heedless when we deal with them, because a wounded bear is far, far more dangerous than an unwounded one. And that's exactly what we're dealing with, a wounded bear. And the recent events with the Supreme Court over Roe v. Wade just goes to show how dangerous this dying animal can be, imposing its will on the rest of us when we don't want it.
Yeah,